I want to introduce you to Congressman Jim Himes of our 4th Congressional District. Welcome, Congressman, to the show.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much. Great to be back.
Well, that was a quick intro, but, I figure we know each other and the audience knows you too.
That's right. That's just fine.
So now let's talk about this debt ceiling, because I have to ask you your philosophy about this. I know that you're in support of raising the debt ceiling. Can you tell me philosophically, is there a number at which the debt ceiling would become too high, or do you take the position, which some people do, that philosophically, since we print our own money, that the debt ceiling is just an artificial number and it doesn't matter?
Well, the debt ceiling matters a lot, because when you're deficit spending, as we have been for the last 10 years, if you don't raise the debt ceiling and you hit it, you don't get to spend another dime. And this isn't a scare like shutting down the government, which would have been an inconvenience. National parks would have been closed and, paychecks might have been held up. This is you don't get to spend another dime. And so it's not a question of whether we're going to raise the debt ceiling or not. We will, because the United States pays its obligations, and we owe the people who own our debt money. Social Security checks need to go out. If we start, what I feel very strongly about, Lisa, is if we start messing around and saying, I want X, Y, or Z in order to raise this debt ceiling, and we get right up against the threshold, the people that we owe money to, that we have to send interest payments to, are going to start getting nervous, and that is going to have a profoundly negative effect on our economy. So yeah, we got to do the hard work. We got to get the debt down. Nobody's disputing that, and you know what? It's going to be a tough project, because it's tough and bitter medicine, just as it is here in Connecticut. But messing around with the debt ceiling is the wrong thing to do.
I think the Republicans are arguing that it becomes a game of kick the can, and that at some point they just want to stop and face the can and argue it out now. Isn't that sort of what they're arguing a little bit, like we're going to have to face this crisis eventually, so we might as well deal head-on with some of the contributing factors to the rise in the debt ceiling now as a political body and wrangle them out before we vote to go ahead and raise the debt ceiling again?
Well, it's not just the Republicans, it's Democrats. It's certainly this Democrat, it's the president, it's others that are saying, by the way, it's S&P, which 5 days ago put a negative long-term credit watch out on the United States long-term debt.
Yeah.
Everybody says, everybody agrees. But, Lisa, this is a lengthy process of negotiation, of preparing the American people for what it is that we're talking about, because we're talking about lots of programs that are near and dear to people's hearts. Social Security, Medicare, we're talking about tax policy, we're talking on spending on education and highways and railways. This is not something that's going to get resolved in the next 10 days, and that's okay. The point about the debt ceiling is if people are saying, I'm not going to raise the debt ceiling unless you do X, Y, or Z, the people who hold our debt out there are going to say, wait a minute, you're saying you're not going to send me interest when it's due? I'm going to raise your cost of borrowing, and that's just a bad idea.
In general, isn't the cost of borrowing anyway going to be going up pretty soon?
Well, certainly if we don't do anything about our fiscal situation, it will go up. People will lose confidence. It's not a 6-month thing. It's not even perhaps a 1-year thing. Those people who say we're going to be Greece 6 months from now are being alarmist. But now we do need to do exactly what you see happening in the Senate with the Gang of Six. We need to be putting together a plan, the elements of which are going to make nobody happy, just the way the Connecticut budget pretty much makes nobody happy, that put us on a sustainable path. And if we do that, people will retain their confidence in our ability to keep our fiscal house in order.
Now, you have been in Congress 3 years, three and a little bit. And
two and a little bit.
Two and a little bit. That's right. You know what? I tell you the truth. I thought it was a year. It does. Okay, so my question is, have you reached across the aisle? Have you made friendships with people that you could form your own Gang of 6 or 60, that you could begin to coalesce with reasonable minds to start to address this?
Absolutely. If you look at the National Journal's ratings of members of Congress in the last Congress, you'll see that I'm pretty much right smack in the middle of the Congress in terms of how I vote, which means that from time to time I will vote for with the Republicans when I think they have good ideas. On the recent short-term budget bills, I voted with them, and frankly, they couldn't have passed their legislation without some Democratic support. So, I'm looking for good ideas regardless of which side of the aisle they come from.
I want to bring something to your attention that I know that I've been corresponding off the air with Elizabeth Kerr, your wonderful press secretary, but the people listening may not know about this. And this is the kind of thing that drives me crazy, Congressman Himes. So I got to make a personal plea to you. On the last budget bill, which was supposed to be about money and spending, Congress did something unprecedented, and they created their own exemption of the endangered species bill. For some reason, there are people that hate wolves in this country. I don't particularly completely understand this unnatural, sick hatred of a particular breed of animal. But they attach this as a tag to the budget in order to make it, basically helicopter shooting season in some states on wolves. It's grossly unfair. It's terrible. What can you do to reverse that?
Yeah, Lisa, I agree with you. And the reason you don't understand why people have, hatred for the wolf is because you're not an Idaho cattle farmer or an Idaho sheep farmer. And, whether they're right or wrong, they believe that these wolves hurt their businesses. But you're absolutely right. And look, I voted for the bill. There was a budget bill that had that in there. And it's one of the tragic things about the way we operate is that you'd never get to vote for anything that you love 100%. There's always going to be some stuff in there that you hate. But you're exactly right. This is the first time ever that Congress has politically taken a species off the endangered species list. This should be something determined by science, not by a bunch of elected officials.
Right.
I couldn't agree more.
So can you amend it now? Is there a way to retract that?
Over time it may be retractable. And by the way, I think, there's no indication that people are going to be shooting wolves from helicopters yet.
No. They wanted to do it. But they did do it in Alaska and Wyoming. They did. They did the helicopter shooting of wolves. It was horrendous.
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you, and it's one of the sad things. There's always something in a bill that you don't like, and that was a very bad precedent for the Congress to set.
So I just want you to know, as somebody who keeps an eye on those issues, that's really important, not just to me, but in a lot of animal lovers in your district. We're really upset about this.
Yep, I hear you.
I know you hear me loud and clear. Okay, so now going back to budget and money and things like that, help us simplify. Is there one thing that you can explain to us out of this budget that will directly affect the people in Fairfield County one way or another that you want us to know about?
Well, sure, Lisa. About the budget that we passed to prevent the government from shutting down, which is what you're talking about. It had that lousy provision in it that took the gray wolf off the endangered species list. The nice thing about that was we were able to preserve the money that is going to help build transportation infrastructure in Steel Point up in Bridgeport, which is really important to that city. But the larger project, Lisa, where we go in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to affect everybody. We're going to be talking about the, non-defense spending, which is the Pell Grants and the investments in our highways and railways, and, that is going to affect people. We'll be talking about tax policy. Can we simplify the tax code? Sounds like a good thing, but, when you start talking about the nitty-gritty, people are like, wait, I don't want you to do that. And then, of course, the long run consists in making Medicare and Social Security sustainable. And that's where the discussion gets tough. We obviously are not going to certainly I'm not going to support anything which in any way damages the benefits that current retirees are getting. But, for a guy like me who's in his 40s, it's going to look a little bit different down the road than it does for somebody who's, in their 60s or 70s right now, if we're going to make this sustainable. That's a tough conversation that sometimes gets demagogued by both parties, but it's one that we have to have.
And what about the president's policy in Libya right now, Congressman Himes? Are you supporting that?
Lisa, I've never been supportive of interceding in a third Muslim country. But I must tell you, I'm a little muted in my criticism of the president because there was a classified briefing shortly after the intervention, and we saw what Gaddafi had planned for the city of Benghazi had he retaken it. And the reason I'm muted in my criticism is that there's no question in my mind that there are tens of thousands of people alive today who would not be but for the decision of Barack Obama to go in. So to be forward-looking, I just hope that we get out of there, and frankly, I hope we can wind down our exposure in Afghanistan and Iraq as soon as possible. We've lost too many young men and women, and we're spending $100 billion every single year in those two countries. And if we're going to improve our schools and our highways, that's got to change.
I totally agree, and I know you have to run, but we had a guest on earlier today named Les Leopold who reported that he had read through most of a recent congressional report on Wall Street, particularly on Goldman Sachs, and I know that you're an alum, and the hypocrisies and the thievery of Goldman Sachs is apparently incontrovertible in this report. And I was wondering what you thought of it, if you'd had a chance to digest it, and if you hadn't, I'd like you to come back to the show and tell us what you think about it.
Yeah, I sure will. I think you're referring to the Senate report that got released, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. I've seen the highlights, but, it's telling us a lot of what we already knew, which is that, in the last 10 years, you just saw some combination of negligence and crazy risk-taking and just plain bad acting that brought us down.
Greed.
Of Americans out of work.
Yeah, but greed and aided and abetted by government policies that enabled some people to stay alive and others to fail, tremendous inequities, and really just, in plain sight, terrible conflicts of interest. And unless we start re-erecting the barriers and the boundaries of people against their own worst instincts, we're just going to be repeating the same thing and getting the bad results.
Yeah, well, that's why, I count as, and I'm not going to tell you it was perfect, but I think it was a very good step forward, the creation of the Dodd-Frank bill, which is going to, do a lot more in the consumer protection area. It's going to keep banks out of some of the riskier behavior they got into. That was an important step forward. And, we got to, to our area here, Fairfield County, the banking and financial services industry is very important, but we want it to be safe.
I want it to be healthy.
We want it to never do what it did in the last 5 years again.
That's right. I want it to be healthy and safe and employ more people, not fewer at the top.
Right.
So you might as well just tell Elizabeth Warren she can have the job. Okay?
Okay, Lisa. Great talking with you.
Thanks, Congressman Himes. Thanks always for being on the show.